I do think, I mean, we saw in this last election, there are literally millions and millions of more Americans who don't support the kind of crazy ethno-nationalist, reactionary, right-wing nonsense that we've seen from the Republican Party, but that we see around the world. And that gets me to our next thing. India's in a lot of pain. India's hurting right now. India is one of the largest countries in the world by population, and they're now the epicenter of coronavirus. This is their second wave, their true second wave. And they're actually surpassing the United States, which is devastating because we completely bungled and dropped the ball on it. And let's take a look at why. Here's the Washington Post. India shatters global record as cases surge again. India's deadly struggle continues unabated, with the country on Friday reporting another record rise in coronavirus cases over the past 24 hours. To date, the country has recorded more than 21.4 million confirmed infections and at least 234,083 deaths. The escalating figures come as nations send emergency aid to India, whose healthcare system is struggling to cope. Some officials have expressed concern that the shipments of crucial supplies are being held up at airports and delayed in reaching hospitals that are in desperate need of oxygen equipment, medicines, and vaccine. Rahul Gandhi, India's opposition leader, wrote to Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday. Modi's very far right. On Friday, demanding that the government act swiftly to vaccinate the entire population, accusing him of declaring premature victory as the virus was exponentially spreading. So this story in Reuters has a bit more of Gandhi's reply, the opposition leader. Let's see. Yeah, Gandhi implored Modi to prepare for another national lockdown, accelerate a countrywide vaccination program, and scientifically track the virus and its mutations. Quote, India is home to 1 out of every 6 human beings on the planet. The pandemic has demonstrated that our size, genetic diversity, and complexity make India fertile ground for the virus to rapidly mutate, transforming itself into a more contagious and more dangerous form, wrote Gandhi. Quote, allowing the controllable spread of the virus in our country will be devastating not only for our people, but also for the rest of the world. India's highly infectious COVID-19 variant B1617 has already spread to other countries, and many nations have moved to cut or restrict movements from India. The Biden administration restricted travel, so did Boris Johnson in the UK. In the past week, India has reported an extra 1.5 million new infections and record daily death tolls since the start of the pandemic. It was reported 21.4 million cases and 234,000 deaths, and has 3.6 million active cases right now. So Modi has been widely criticized for not acting sooner to suppress the second wave, after religious festivals and political rallies drew tens of thousands of people in recent weeks and became super spreader events. So his government, which imposed a strict lockdown in March 2020, has also been criticized for lifting social restrictions too soon following the first wave and for delays in the country's vaccine program. What does that sound like to you guys? What does that sound like? Modi, if you guys don't know, Modi is a far-right kind of, religious nationalist, a Hindu nationalist. I was actually just talking to somebody from India who lives in Delhi in my Discord. It was great to meet him and hear about him. And he was talking about how so much of the far right in India has to do with religious nationalism. And that was a big part of it. So here's a bit of video. This is from PBS NewsHour. Guys, if you want as milquetoast, non-partisan news you can get, go to PBS NewsHour. Judy Woodruff holds it down. So let's check this out.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his political party suffered a major blow yesterday after losing regional elections in West Bengal.
Oh, yeah. So Modi and his party just took a hit.
A clear sign that Modi's political reputation is being tested. Over the years, Modi has deployed Hindu nationalist rhetoric and nationalist policies that have raised his popularity and transformed India's politics. But his version of nationalism has bitterly divided Hindus from other ethnic groups in India. His refusal to stop holding large campaign rallies and to allow a huge Hindu religious
Jesus.
festival are believed to be major contributors.
Look at that crowd. Did you see that?
His refusal to stop holding large campaign
Oh my gosh.
rallies and to allow a huge Hindu religious festival are believed to be major contributors to this spike. And now, as a new, highly contagious variant has emerged in the country, Modi has resisted calls for any further lockdowns. I am joined now by someone who has been covering India's pandemic from the very beginning. Barkha Dutt is a journalist based in New Delhi. Her work appears in many places, including the Washington Post. Barkha Dutt.
Now, this is insane. This reporter, which I should move to default view, her father just died of COVID. And she is going on the news to talk about COVID in India, which, props to her. That's insane. So this, the spread of COVID in India has been devastating. It's been absolutely devastating. Let's hear what she has to say.
Thank you very much for talking with us on the NewsHour. First off, I should say you lost your father last week to this coronavirus, and I'm terribly sorry about your loss, and especially grateful for you taking the time to talk with us. Could you just give us a sense of the latest of what you've been seeing on the ground there?
In some ways, it's been a surreal week because 15 months of my journalistic life have been spent reporting this pandemic. And when the news came home, when I lost my dad, in some ways I became every desolate family that I have reported on outside of hospital doors that are too overrun to make space for patients, or cremation grounds that have run out of spaces. That having been said,
they were literally, they ran out of cremation areas to do cremation, which is a big tradition in India. So they're doing it in like public parks.
I do want to underline that even in this moment of deep personal loss, I am aware that I have been luckier than most of my countrymen and women. However, when I look at what's happening on the streets of my country in the major cities, most Indians are not able to get a bed. They're not able to get a doctor. And if they do get a hospital bed, they are dying in hospital because of a murderous disruption in oxygen supply to our health facilities. So what we're seeing is, in the words of one doctor, healthcare workers who've been sent in to fight a nuclear war with a stick. It has been a monumental betrayal. It has been a monumental failure of policy. It has been a monumental illustration of misjudgment, and it has been a monumental absence of preparing for the second wave.
So this is absolutely devastating, and we see so much of what our initial response to COVID was about here, like medical supplies, hospital capacity. This is what Flatten the Curve is all about. And they're about to talk about Modi again. And keep in mind, Modi has been a very divisive, far-right figure of leadership in India. And I just want you all to keep in your mind how Trump was about coronavirus, calling it a hoax, not wearing a mask, doing his rallies, his presidential campaign rallies in the middle of this pandemic, telling people to not worry about it, don't let it run your life. Keep that in mind as we hear about, and then the results of the election, of course, fully repudiating him for that failure and that hubris and incompetence. And now let's hear a bit about how it's going for Modi with how he's handled things.
We mentioned how Prime Minister Modi has certainly seen his reputation badly dented because of this, and as we reported, he took a pretty bad beating in the state elections in West Bengal. Is it your sense that election and people's discontent is a real reflection on him and his failures here?
Just because I'm a hardened journalist, I don't draw quick political conclusions. I know a lot of people have wanted to see in that result some sort of comeuppance for the policy failures that have brought our country to this pass. I don't know, because this was a state election. The national election, which will decide the fate of Prime Minister Modi, is still 3 years away. Public memory is short. But what I can confirm is that pain and helplessness among people is turning to rage. Any number of people on the streets that I meet and interview with say, what did we vote for you for? And I think a lot of people are asking the following questions. Why did India gift away or export vaccines before it had enough for its own people? Why did India not order more vaccines? Why did the government continue to hold, including by the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, mammoth political rallies through the past month that this carnage has been unleashed on our people? There has been a flip and a turnaround on almost all of these decisions, but it's too late. And experts are telling me that there are not enough vaccines to take India out of the second wave. It's almost as if we have no choice but to live through the carnage. So yes, I think people are angry.
Damn. So, I mean, and what has been seen from Modi, who's a far-right religious nationalist, right? Over there in India, it's Hindu nationalism. But keep in mind how Trump is a far-right, and yeah, I believe more an ethno-nationalist than a religious nationalist because he's barely religious. But, he really would use the Bible and use Christianity. And if you don't understand how much white nationalism is tied into Christian nationalism here in the United States, well, you gotta do a little work. I'll help you along with that. We're all learning together, right? But that's a big thing. And so, but this isn't just happening in India and the United States. One of the places where COVID is the absolutely worst right now in the Western Hemisphere is Brazil, the largest country in South America that has a ghoulish, far-right leader, president. I don't know if they call him the prime minister. I believe he's president. Jair Bolsonaro. Anybody who is in the know will know if I say Bolsonaro what I'm talking about. But Bolsonaro, same deal. Religious fundamentalist nationalist, right? Religious nationalist. And he actually has shown very disturbing outward support for the military dictatorship of the past in Brazil, and talked it up even before he ran for president when he was in I believe the Senate. And he is a dangerous guy. I mean, the left-wing party officials have been assassinated in Brazil, and one of Bolsonaro's own sons is under investigation for being involved in that. But literally, Bolsonaro really worshipped Trump, and a lot of the same things, anti-face masks. Bolsonaro was that way, downplaying coronavirus. He had the country buy a shit ton of hydroxychloroquine. Wonder why? Who was really into that stuff, right? Here's a bit more of PBS NewsHour from Brazil. Let's just hear a bit more about what's going on there.
From big cities like Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo to remote river communities along the Amazon. Over 400,000 Brazilians have died of COVID since the pandemic began here last year. It's a death toll second only to the United States. Many Brazilians blame this man, the country's right-wing populist leader, Jair Bolsonaro. Here he is speaking in November, just as the disastrous second wave was getting underway.
Everything is about the pandemic nowadays. We have got to stop with this. I'm sorry for the dead. I'm sorry, but we're all going to die one day. Everybody here is going to die. We have to stop being a country of sissies.
Suck it up, sissies.
Marcia Castro is a Brazilian researcher and chair of the Department of Global Health and Population at Harvard's Chan School of Public Health.
The president of Brazil was very similar to what Donald Trump used to be when he was president. So they both denied the importance of the virus. They both completely ignored science. They both had behavior of going out, hanging out with people, shaking hands, not using masks. So completely against of what.
Both Bolsonaro and Trump were infected with coronavirus, and of course had the best possible medical care to get them through it.
Had to be done. And they also both were against lockdowns.
The country's top leadership allowed the virus to spread unhindered in the name of the economy and with the belief that so-called herd immunity could end the pandemic.
Now, let's take a minute to step back, guys, and realize that this was the right's response to coronavirus was herd immunity. And what is herd immunity? Herd immunity arrives when more than 70% of a population has antibodies to a virus. And that really only comes after widespread vaccination. Because herd immunity arrived at through infection is not traditional herd immunity. That is basically, in my opinion, it's a eugenics project. And you heard it so many times. You hear so many people say, well, I don't have to worry about it. I'm healthy. It's only affecting the old, right? It goes to like Joe Rogan, right? I can say this. I'm a Joe, like from one Joe to another. Joe Rogan saying, if you're healthy, you don't have anything to worry about. Bullshit, man. And he should know about this, there are like UFC fighters who've got it and talked about how it ravaged their bodies and did organ damage. And frankly, the whole it only kills the old, that's not true either. Look at this in Brazil. Here's a story from the BBC. Why are so many babies dying of COVID-19 in Brazil? This poor woman and her husband lost their baby boy, who they had difficulties, becoming pregnant in the first place, and then they had their little boy. And a doctor didn't think it was coronavirus early on when he was lethargic and feverish, or the symptoms he was showing. He didn't show enough of them. The doctor said, nah, it's no big deal. Send him home. And, then a week or two later, the kid gets worse. They take him back. They finally test him. He does have coronavirus. And they do all these different things to try to save him. Little boy has a fucking stroke and dies. Okay? Just terrible. Absolutely terrible. And so, let's see. I wanted to get to, it's just devastating. I mean, these poor people, and this has been, it's believed this is why a lot of babies have died in Brazil, is because they weren't taken, the cases weren't taken seriously when these kids were sick with COVID, because it was just like, they don't really get it, right? But these kids did. So this is what I was looking for. There's a misconception that children are at zero risk for COVID, says Dr. Fatima Marinho, who is also a senior advisor to the international health NGO Vital Strategies. Marinho's research has found that a shockingly high number of children and babies have been infected by the virus. Between February 2020 and March 15, 2021, COVID-19 killed at least 552 of Brazil's children up to the age of 9. Including 518 babies under 1 year old, according to the figures from the Brazilian Ministry of Health. But Dr. Marino estimates that more than twice this number of children died of COVID. A serious problem of underreporting due to lack of COVID testing is bringing the numbers down, she says. Dr. Marino calculated the excess of deaths by unspecified acute respiratory syndrome during the pandemic, found that there were 10 times more deaths by unexplained respiratory syndrome than in previous years. By adding these numbers, she estimated the virus in fact killed more like 2,060 children under 9 years old, including 1,302 babies. Not only that, and so, I mean, like I said, I see the willingness to just that the right, this was how the right wanted to handle COVID, as it's not a big deal. Okay, it's kind of a big deal. Suck it up. Stop, as Bolsonaro said, stop being sissies, a country of sissies. As Trump said, don't let it rule your life, after he got experimental gene treatment. And so the underreporting, as we saw, as was just mentioned in that story, it's believed to have happened here in the United States because, Trump and his administration, in an effort to downplay everything, didn't have the tests, didn't have everything in place, anti-science in general. New study estimates more than 900,000 people have died of COVID-19 in the U.S., a number 57% higher than official figures. So, and the study's authors say the COVID-19 death count is nearly 7 million, more than double the reported number of 3.24 million worldwide. This is these are researchers at the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, who looked at excess mortality from March 2020 through May 3rd, 2021. It's just insane. This is, and not only was the right kind of making this posture of it's not a big deal in this, but I mean, they were open about this herd immunity thing. Bolsonaro attempted to follow it. His administration thought herd immunity was the way to go. Even Sweden, the conservative party in Sweden, which, you know, they're still social democrats, but they are conservatives. They pursued the same thing, and it was they had a devastating death rate for a country of their size, that is. But here in the United States, guys, the Trump administration had an appointee at, I believe, Health and Human Services, who literally said in an email, quote, "We want them infected." Trump appointee demanded, quote, "herd immunity strategy emails reveal." So the Trump administration was actively hoping that people would get coronavirus because they wanted herd immunity. This is what anti-science ideology gets you. This is what this kind of, you know, masculinity obsessed, we could call it toxic masculinity, right? This crazy right-wing machismo bullshit that you saw from Trump, you see from Bolsonaro, and from Modi in India. So you have this pairing not just of anti-science and, you know, machismo, but at the same time, when you have religious nationalism and right-wing nationalism, there is just a hatred of secular, left, liberal, even people. You see it in so many of the, you know, right here in America that call everybody communist. You know, Joe Biden's a communist and you're a communist. I've had chuds here in the chat go, commie, you fat commie, and all that kind of shit, right? And this is, you know, I mean, there have been people who have even said, like, you know, on live TV that, you know, we might want to do something about problems like climate change if the liberals weren't just so like about it, right? They really are motivated by a type of hatred. And when they see that, you know, they're blaming Democrats for shutdowns and, you know, you're destroying our local businesses and stuff like that. I'm sorry, but, you know, the pandemic, the virus, the pandemic, which never should have spread across the United States or any of these countries in the way it did. If these right-wing governments, these right-wing leaders actually embrace science, embrace the most effective ways to fight this thing, you know, I mean, the whole turning masks into some kind of, cultural signifier that you're not some wussy that needs a mask and my freedom isn't going to be curtailed, right? I mean, that's a big problem, you know, that of how it spread. In the United States, there have been studies that have shown that, you know, the most people who don't wear masks and anti-maskers are men, right? So it's this whole like frickin', you know, right-wing machismo attitude, this masculine, like, I don't need no little piece of cloth on my face. Tell me what to do, strip me of my freedoms, right? And here we see, I mean, this is why the right, you know, the right is incompetent. The right is, it's so funny how one of their biggest mantras is the government can't do anything right. The government can't do anything right. Yeah, when they're in power, the government can't do anything right because they hobble and destroy the government every last chance they get. Any service that the government provides that actually works, healthcare, environmental protections, you know, the Department of Health and Human Safety had a guy saying, a Trump appointee saying, we need people infected. This is the Department of Health and Human Safety. Let's get people sick, right? I mean, it's nuts, and this just has to be understood. We can understand it and go, yeah, what do people always say? Orange man bad. We can understand Trump is bad, right? But if you don't understand that, we have seen now this repeated offense of letting a preventable disease run rampant and burn through populations like wildfire, repeatedly by right-wing nationalist leaders in 3 of the most, populated and powerful countries in the world, democracies, right? This shows how completely bankrupt and bereft, that the right are when it comes to just handling. I'm sorry, but this is like just keeping the lights running. This shouldn't be something insanely difficult or, it's just insane. And it really comes down to these policies. You know what I mean? Modi's holding, and their attitude. Modi is holding these massive rallies. Trump held rallies. Trump got sick after holding rallies. Bolsonaro, same thing. Stop being wimps, right? And going out and crowding around with people. It's insane. Trev in the comments. Last study of ivermectin against COVID-19 is only 83% effective. Thank you. You put that in the. I heard it from the NYC COVID doctor on the Michael Brooks show a few months ago. Wow. Cost for 2 months under $2. I don't know what you're talking about, bro. Jay and your world, we're all gonna die, you sissies. Yeah, we're all gonna die. Bolsonaro has had corona like 8 times. I don't know. I can't remember if he's been reinfected. That is kind of a funny thing, but it's just crazy. It's absolutely insane, and that's why it's so crazy how so many people on the right are that way, because it very much is like cultural impetuses, right? Religion. Their ideas of their gender identity, right? They want simple, categories, right? That's what all the anti-trans stuff is about. But then seeing, whatever it might be, country music, red meat. That's why they lied about Joe Biden's environmental regulations. They're going to take your burgers. They went back to that Green New Deal lie. AOC's going to abolish hamburgers, right? And all that dumb shit, right? It's because that really is what matters to the right, is cultural signifiers, the base at least. But really what the right is intent on accomplishing while in power is consolidating power for the very wealthy, privatizing just about everything they can, every service the government provides that they can, except for law enforcement, of course. They do like private contractors in war zones, don't get me wrong.